Welcome to Charting Stack, where we dive into ideas, people, and policies reshaping how the world moves. Today, we're talking light electric vehicles, from e-bikes and cargo bikes to speed, pedelecs, and emerging formats. At the center of this is LEVA-EU, the Ghent-based trade association working to ensure these vehicles get fair regulations they deserve. Joining us is Annick Roetynck, Managing Director of LEVA-EU, who has spent decades at the intersections of cycling, EU policy, and sustainable transport. Under her leadership, LEVA-EU is pushing to align European law with innovation, giving light electric vehicles a real chance to thrive. Annick, welcome to Charting Stack.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Likewise, I would like to begin today's podcast with a question about the origin and the story. Um, What inspired you to launch LEVA-EU, and how did your background in cycling advocacy led you here?
Well, it actually goes back many, many years ago. I was working for the European Trade Association for bicycle, moped, motorcycle retailers, and I was specifically lobbying the European Parliament and Commission for better regulation for electric bicycles at that time. That kind of made me aware that we will not achieve sustainable mobility with electric bikes on two wheels only. We actually need a wide variety of vehicles to attract as many people as possible to change into electric mobility, but not only electric mobility, also electric mobility that is much lighter than what currently electric cars are offering. And I noticed that there was very little awareness among the politicians and the decision makers around these vehicles. I was also thinking, well, there is nobody around who is actually working for this wide range of light electric vehicles. All sorts of things happened as a result of which I had a possibility to start a new association, not the least that I met some like-minded people. Uh, and so in 2017, we launched LEVA-EU, and here we are today.
Congrats on the current accomplishments. I wanted to ask you how LEVA-EU evolved as the market for light electric vehicles has, pretty much exploded across Europe in the past few years and decade.
Well, to be honest, in the first year that we existed, we found ourselves confronted with the dumping case. The Commission had initiated an investigation into electric bicycles from China, which involved a lot of European companies. And as a result, the first year of our existence, we were mainly focused on the dumping issue and on electric bike companies. But after that, and very quickly, we became involved in much wider issues to do with legislation, technical legislation, Regulation 168 2013, the Machinery Directive. But also, we joined the whole standardization process in CEN at European level, but also at international level at IEC. And so that brings us to where we are today, where we are really trying to monitor all the legislative issues which are relevant for our members, which are companies active in the light electric vehicle sector, and where we also try to influence the process so that we can obtain the best possible legislation for our sector. So today, we are still working on that wide range of issues. As I said, through standardization, but also through direct contacts with the Commission, the European Parliament. And we are also members of several expert groups. These are groups established by the European Commission to have direct consultations, also involving the member states on legislation. For instance, there's a motorcycle working group for Regulation 168 2013, or the machinery expert group for the Machinery Directive.
Awesome. Now zooming back to our third questions from the origin story and the mission. What would you say is a single biggest regulatory win that association has helped secure so far?
If you allow me, I would like to quote not one but two. because I think the following two are really
Absolutely.
major.
Yes.
So we have fought very hard for series hybrid systems. These are transmission systems without a chain. And at a certain moment, European Commission had concluded that these systems, if you put them on an electric bicycle or an electric cargo bike, did not result in vehicles that were excluded from type approval. Now, if that would have gone ahead, these vehicles would not have had any chance, or the system series hybrids, because it's very difficult to get through type approval, which is originally written for mopeds and motorcycles. So we fought very hard, and we managed to introduce in the standard EN 17860-5, which is a standard for electric cargo cycles. And part 5 is the standard on electrical elements of the cargo bikes. So we managed to make sure that this standard could cover series hybrid systems. So as a result of that, cargo bike manufacturers in Europe and series hybrid system producers can now bring systems on the market, vehicles on the market with the system, and be ensured that the vehicles will not come under Regulation 168/2013, but that they are considered e-packs, which in all member states enjoy the same road traffic conditions as conventional bicycles. So that was a major boost for the cargo bike sector, electric cargo bike sector. The second one I would want to mention, we are part of the expert group on urban mobility, which is the Commission expert group that had to formulate recommendations as to how to improve urban mobility. And as is traditionally the case, there was a lot of talk of walking and cycling, and we were able to have an addition to walking and cycling of electric mobility in a systematic way. So everywhere in the recommendations where it mentions walking, cycling, it also mentions electric mobility. But even more importantly, we managed to get a recommendation stating that the Commission must develop harmonized technical legislation and a mandate-related standards for light electric vehicles. So we have been, from the start of LEVA-EU, been advocating for a specific regulation, for technical regulation for light electric vehicles. And that is now in those recommendations by the expert group to the Commission. And actually, since that recommendation, we are now working very hard to convince the Commission to go ahead with the development of this regulation.
Congrats on these two. And I would like maybe to broad the specter for our listeners, maybe with asking you, where do EU rules currently hold back the light electric vehicle adoption or a proper adoption? Maybe let's
No,
say.
I think where the problem is the fact that the rules have not been developed for light electric vehicles. Either light electric vehicles come under Regulation 168/2013, which sets out the type approval for mopeds and motorcycles. So there's a lot of requirements in there which do not fit for light electric vehicles. And also, one should wonder, do we really need a type approval as a compliance procedure for light electric vehicles? If they are excluded from Regulation 168/2013, they come under the Machinery Directive. So we are wondering, why is it that machines can have their own legislation, mopeds, motorcycles can have their own legislation, but light electric vehicles cannot have their own legislation? We think it's really important, because as a result of this, there is also no consultation between the Commission and the light electric vehicle sector. I mean, LEVA-EU is part of the Motorcycle Working Group and is part of the Machinery Expert Group. But as you will probably realize, these expert groups only talk very little about light electric vehicles. So we want our own light electric vehicle expert group, which will bring together the Commission, the member states, and light electric vehicle stakeholders. And all together, we want to develop a light electric vehicle regulation and then continue in the future the discussion as to how this should further evolve. Also, within this light electric vehicle regulation, we can then have different compliance procedures, as is the case for machinery. If you have simple machine, you don't need type approval. You can maybe go ahead with self-certification, which is now the case for EPACs. So we would like the same, that in consultation with the LEV industry, we decide, all right, this is a simple vehicle. We can safely put it on the market with self-certification, or this is a more complicated vehicle. We need a notified body to be involved, or it is a very complicated vehicle. Therefore, we need type approval, but then the type approval would be written for that vehicle and not as a variation on a moped or a motorcycle.
Yeah, so as you said, one of the key critiques is how light electric vehicles get squeezed into either bicycle or kind of moped categories. How does this classification fail the industry? What would you say? And we were also talking about on our first meeting how, because on Project Stack we talk a lot about micromobility, but you don't prefer that term. You prefer the term
No.
of light electric vehicles. Why is that? So maybe I have two questions in one.
Okay. Well, to your question as to why we don't like the term micromobility is because it's just one of the many terms which are out there. There's also light means of transport, personal mobility devices, and everybody is using these terms, but they really don't know what they're referring to. Whereas we say, well, if we use the term light electric vehicles, we can then have an agreement as to which vehicles come under this term. For us, this is the term we're already using, and it refers to everything which is electric and comes under 168/2013 in the categories L1 to L7, as well as everything which is included under Article 2.2 of that regulation, which is electric bikes, 250 watts, 25 kilometers an hour, e-scooters, self-balancing vehicles, and so on. So it is a wide variety of vehicles, and we want that to be acknowledged by the term, and we think light electric vehicles in that respect is the most suitable term. Now, we talk about classifying as a bicycle or classifying as a moped. I hate to break it to you, but we don't live in a world of bicycles and mopeds anymore. If you look on the street, you will see many vehicles which do not fit the traditional image anymore of bicycles and mopeds. And to us, it doesn't matter, because we do want some very wide variety of vehicles. We just want there to be vehicles available for all possible user groups, and that is not the case today, because they are being pushed into this legislation, technical legislation, which is not suitable. I will give you one example. Your bike needs to be 25 kilometers an hour and have a maximum continuous rated power of 250 watt to be excluded from the type approval. All member states have then recognized that this e-bike gets the same status on the road as a conventional bicycle. The result is that there's millions of these vehicles on the road. Now, if you increase the maximum continuous rated power from 250 watt to 300 watt, that same exact bike is going to come under type approval. You cannot explain to any reasonable person that two vehicles which have the same kinetic energy come under two completely different legislative frameworks. And the result is that the one which does not comply with this 250 watt maximum continuous rated power and pedal assistance is not available because it's in the type approval, because it's too difficult to have it type approved. Nobody wants to bother with it. Now, Europe has 87 million handicapped people, and many millions of these people are not able to use an electric bicycle because the current models, they require you to pedal all the time. You could have a vehicle where if you're tired, you can just push a button and the motor takes over and you don't have to pedal. But if you want to bring such a vehicle on the market, it comes under L1EA and the type approval, and therefore there are no such vehicles on the market. We just find this totally illogical, totally unacceptable, and that's all the more a reason for us to plead for this light electric vehicle regulation.
Yeah, so now when we have the terminology and your goals, can we now be a bit more specific? Let's say something our listeners can understand. Maybe if you could change one piece of EU legislation tomorrow, what would it be? Something that's maybe totally
It would be,
obvious.
it would be without any doubt, Regulation 168/2013 to exclude all light electric vehicles, not only the ones which are excluded today. But it would, again, you can't do that without changing the machinery directive, where it says that if vehicles do not come under 168/2013, they come under the machinery directive. That too is, so we want to change those two, exclude all light electric vehicles and bring them all under our light electric vehicle regulation. And then in consultation with the sector, we set out the essential safety requirements for these vehicles. We decided different categories, which we believe as an association should be based on kinetic energy, because vehicles with the same kinetic energy, they have the same impact when there is a collision. So there is no reason to have different technical rules. And then also decide on which compliance procedures you need for which categories of vehicles. It's very simple
Mm-hmm.
in our minds.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
it seems to be very difficult for other people to get their head around it. But I mean, it would be simple to do because with the sector, we have already done many different, risk assessments. So we know what the essential safety risks are for these vehicles, what needs to be covered in the legislation. So yeah, the basic work has been done. It's only the legislative change that needs to be carried through.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said, we talk a lot about this category on our podcast. But you have the data for sure. So can you tell us maybe we know okay e-bikes and electric scooters are booming, but what other we call them LEV like light electric vehicles categories are we seeing strong growth in? Are those cargo bikes, speed pedelecs,
Uh,
delivery
uh,
fleets?
yeah, I'll be very frank to you. For the moment, it's not a good time in the sector. There's still the backlash from the COVID period. Then for the moment, there's also the economic situation is not great. There's a lot of uncertainty internationally on many different levels, economically, politically. And as a result, the economic situation in the sector is not great. You see that even the growth of the conventional electric bicycles is stagnating. Um, we shortly before everything started, we saw a growth in cargo bikes, because throughout Europe there are many cities which close off their cities for cars, for trucks, for vans, and when that happens, you automatically see a surge of cargo bikes, both for private use and for logistics. But for the moment, the situation is really not very bright, and we hope that there's going to be a change soon. I must also add to that that the changed attitude of the European Commission has had a major impact, because the previous Commission was fully focused on the green transition, tackling climate change, sustainable development. That has completely changed under this Commission. And for transport, they're focusing on trying to save the conventional car industry, which in our opinion is a bit of a waste of time, because we cannot continue with the car concept as it was. But the result of that is that there's very little attention for light electric vehicles and very little attention for the hundreds of small and medium-sized enterprises behind these vehicles in the sector, who are creating jobs, green jobs, by the way, who are helping to tackle climate change, who are helping for the transition to sustainable transport. So that's a pity. We still knock on the doors in Brussels of the Commission to get the attention we think this sector is deserving. But for the moment, it's not a very bright picture.
So how do you see LEVs complementing rather than competing with cars and public transit? Do you have your own, let's say, ideology of how this should look?
I think the big change which we already see today is that a few years ago, people were really fixated on car usage. They would do everything with their car. And I think that it's fair to say that that has changed dramatically. Already, if you look at the number of young people who do not take their test for their driver's license, which means that they're not going to drive a car, is quite impressive. And I think we're moving towards a situation where people are using a much bigger mix of transport means, which includes cars, public transport, and hopefully also more and more light electric vehicles. But I would like to use this opportunity to explain what the potential is of the use of light electric vehicles. Because a few years ago, we ordered a study from the German Research Institute, DLR, to calculate what the potential savings would be in CO2 emissions if there would be a major changeover from cars to light electric vehicles. And the results were quite astonishing. They concluded that 76% of all car trips can just as well be done by light electric vehicles. That would result in 50% less car mileage and in 44% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. So the potential is enormous. And yeah, we believe and we hope that this use of light electric vehicles will continue to expand and boom. And we believe that the logical result of this is that car usage is going to diminish. I once heard someone say that we buy cars with the worst scenario in our head. We buy a car because once or twice a year we want to go far away on a holiday. In Belgium, many people go to France, to the south of France, which is, I don't know, 1,500 kilometers maybe. And so you need to pack your whole family and your bikes and your little dinghy and everything in that car. So you buy a car to be able to cope with that. But then when you look at the rest of the year, what you do with your car, you take the children to school or you do some shopping. And actually, from research, it turns out that cars are parked up for 95% of their time. So we think that this is not the right situation. It results in a lot of uptake of public space, which would also be solved if we would change over to light electric vehicles. So I can name a lot of advantages of changing over as much as possible from car trips to light electric vehicles.
Yeah, I totally agree. Absolutely. And I myself, I'm in the same situation. A year ago, I sold my car and I'm totally carless, living in Croatia, in a smaller city, but also a city that's highly bikeable. And yeah, in my life, I realized that, uh, as you said, like those like the worst case scenarios, I would just rent a car because the
Yes.
prices also dropped
Yeah.
drastically. You can rent a car for 30, 35, 40 euros, even less per day, which is when you some people say, "Oh yeah, it is a lot of money still," but when you think how much money of maintenance and depreciation of your vehicle, from the get-go will lose, it's a no-brainer. Understand if
Totally.
someone, yeah, it's doing some different kind of it has some different situation, but a lot of people can live without a car.
Yeah, and I started to work in the business in the 80s, so I'm getting on a bit. And I remember when I started, there was still in our country, there were stickers around saying, "My car, my freedom." But I think that slogan will be rejected by many, many people by now, because very often you find yourself caught up in traffic jams to go to work every day or to go to your holiday destination in the south of France. So that principle of your car is your freedom has really turned out to be not as what was promised. And we have, for instance, done a project with speed pedelecs and asked people to commute for 3 weeks with their speed pedelecs. And one of the things which, to our amazement, came out of that project was that people were happy to go on their speed pedelec to work, and they experienced it as a kind of freedom. And they would post loads of photos on Facebook about sunrises and beautiful landscapes that they were cycling through. So that is really a big difference as opposed to being locked up in your little cage in a traffic jam. So I think that's
Absolutely.
also an element which helps to promote light electric vehicles by themselves.
We've been scrolling your newsletter. Really interesting one. We encourage all our listeners to subscribe as well. And in the newsletter, we've seen a lot of your members, small and medium-sized companies. What would you say? What unique challenges do they face under current EU type approval rules?
But I have to go back to the legislation. Their development is being hampered by 168/2013 and the Machinery Directive. But on top of that comes an enormous growing mountain of legislation. Because if you look at everything that they have to comply with, it's not only either machinery or 168/2013, it's also EMC, it's ROSE, it's WE, there's the Cybersecurity Act, there's the Critical Raw Materials Act, and it really becomes such a huge amount of legislation that it becomes very complicated and very expensive for companies to comply with. And the current commission is in trying to come to simplifications. We hope that will also happen for our sector, which doesn't mean that we want all the objectives which were originally behind the legislation, which is sustainability and so on, to be thrown away. Absolutely not. But there is no coherence. The Commission has its different departments, and every department issues their legislation, and they're not talking to each other and
Yeah.
not looking at how they can make a coherent legislative framework which is feasible for especially for small and medium-sized enterprises.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm always an advocate of legislation, but often a European Union seems to cause a lot of burden on startups and companies because legislation is just too complex and not clear enough.
Yes,
Which
totally,
which
totally
we
agree.
definitely need someone like LEVA-EU to work into direction of creating an environment where everything is strictly regulated, yes, but also that we are opening doors for businesses to open and for economy to grow uh, in general.
Yeah, and another element in all this is also that if you really want to do it the right way, it's very complex, very time-consuming, and very expensive. But then on the other side, you see that companies from outside Europe through internet are advertising products. And it's clear at first sight that they can't do it in a legal way. And still, they are able to operate in Europe. They were able to put their vehicles on the market. And this is what is causing a lot of issues for the moment, for instance, with e-scooters or what is now called fat bikes. These are usually vehicles which have been put on the market by companies from outside Europe which do not comply with the legislation. And this is really for our members a hard thing because they're doing their very best to work according to the rules. And then the companies do not respect the rules. They put their vehicles on the market. But then it's the companies that do work according to the rules who have to pay for what they're doing. Because when member states start to talk about helmets, for instance, on e-scooters in Belgium, they're now thinking of number plates on e-scooters. this is a punishment for those who do it legally, caused by those who don't do it legally and who do not get checked by the surveillance authorities. Just to quote one example, in 2023, more than 220,000 electric bikes were put on the market in Europe at an average value of, I think, €238. Now, you tell me how you can put a legal e-bike on the market for €238. And there are dumping measures in place. So there's something not quite
Yeah,
right here. And that's really something that needs to be addressed by the politicians.
absolutely. We had a really interesting company called Soul Motors from Germany.
Yes.
They have an amazing product. They call it Noped. And they were saying, I was also asking them about some legislation hurdles, and they were telling me also, comparing all those, I don't want to say it, but we can also kind of agree it's a lot of these Chinese brands that are kind of, just overflowing the Europe, that go super fast, that are totally out of control, let's say. And he was saying how, yeah, but if I want to make something in that category, I cannot, because I am doing it legal way.
Yeah,
I do want to have maybe a more sporty version of my bike, but the legislation is so complex, I just legally cannot make it right
exactly.
now.
Yeah.
I mean, why shouldn't he be able to? But unfortunately, he cannot due to legislation
Yeah.
problems. Um, can you share possibly example of influencing EU decision making, perhaps through consultations or committees?
Yes, as I explained, we are a member of the motorcycle working group that works on 168/2013, the machinery directive. Also, very important, we are a member of what is called the waste expert group. That's the expert group that works with the European Commission and the member states on the battery regulation, which is also a major piece of legislation for our sector. So through these expert groups, we are in direct contact with the European Commission to see how legislation needs to be improved, corrected, amended, and so on. And next to that, obviously, as I already said, we also work in standardization. So vehicles which come under the machinery directive, for those vehicles, we can develop standards to help manufacturers to translate the machinery directive into requirements for light electric vehicles. And so we are very active in SEN, in TC333 for electric bikes, cargo bikes, but also 354 for e-scooters. We're also in the committee for SEN TC21X for batteries. And we're working at international level, i.e. CTC 125 on e-transporters, and our technical director, Bram Rotier, is even the secretary of that TC. So we are really trying to spread our wings as broad as we can
Mm-hmm.
to cover as much as we can. And obviously, we also have regular contacts with members of the European Parliament to discuss with them the problems we have. And I would like to mention also that we're working with, we're a member of SBS, which is an organization aimed at encouraging the involvement of SMEs in standardization. We have a very good working relation with them as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, congrats again on all accomplishments so far and your work. We're here to support you.
Thank you.
What would you say? How do you balance the needs of your very different and broad spectrum of members, from small e-bikes builders to let's say global suppliers?
Yeah. Actually, that is not a problem at all because we all have the same mission, which is to get as many different light electric vehicles on the market. And broadly speaking, the problems that all these companies are confronted with are the same because they come from the same technical legislation. So there is not really a problem in balancing. I must admit, when we first started, um, as I said, we mainly had companies active in the field of electric bicycles, and some of them would then start asking questions like, why would you like the e-scooters with it? But I think this idea that we're working for all types of light electric vehicles, because we really believe that that's the only way to achieve sustainable mobility, that message has not now gone through, and I think our members have understood it. And as I said, it doesn't really create any problem in our work.
Mm-hmm. Let's say then looking ahead, you're personally, where do you see light electric vehicles playing the biggest role in Europe's, let's say, 2030 climate and mobility targets, or 2035?
They could, as I said, by quoting the results from the LEFA climate report done by DLR for us, which shows the potential in emission reduction. It shows that there is a huge potential, and I think the companies are ready to fulfill that potential. The only question is, are we going to get our legislation? Because that's the one and only condition to really allow this sector to fully develop. Without that legislation, yeah, we will still be, yeah, have to fixate or to really concentrate on 250 watt, 25 kilometers an hour pedal assistance, e-scooters. What is already in the market, it doesn't leave much room for innovation. In France, there is a big project which is supported by the French government called ADEME. And there are many small companies in that project which are developing very interesting vehicles in the L5, L6, L7 category. But again, you see that these companies have really trouble in getting through the legislation and having their vehicles approved. But I would really encourage the people who are watching this podcast to look up ADEME and to have a look at the vehicles, because there's all sorts of vehicles for all sorts of use cases. And it clearly shows the concept of light electric vehicles.
Mm-hmm. So let's say, how can cities, startups, policymakers collaborate more effectively to build light electrical vehicles more friendly ecosystem, let's say. I don't know how to express myself.
with having this light electric vehicle expert group with the Commission, because then we will have the Commission, we will have the member states, we will have the stakeholders, and we can talk there not only about the technical legislation, not only about the LEV regulation, but if the member states are there together, they can also talk to each other about best practice. For instance, Belgium is quite a champion for light electric vehicles. Belgium is the market leader for speed pedelecs because they have developed very specific terms of use for speed pedelecs in Belgium. And this is typically something that could be shared in such an expert group with the other member states, because now every member state is working on their own little island, thinking that they have to reinvent the wheel. We have the same with technical legislation for e-scooters. There are a lot of member states who kind of believe there is no technical legislation today, not knowing that there is the machinery directive and the standard, and they start to develop their own legislation, which means that e-scooter manufacturers sometimes have to produce tens of different models for each member state. If we would have our LEF consultation, LEF expert group, again, there could be an exchange between the member states, like how should we address this issue in a harmonized way, so that we can uphold the idea of a single market and of a European Union, instead of continuing to build 27 different regulations for each member state.
Mm-hmm. Well understood. And this kind of, I would say, concludes us with the question parts. We exhausted all of my questions. And now I'm kind of switching to, I've prepared 5 lightning round questions which you can kind of answer in a sentence or two. So if you're ready, we can start. Let's say, most underrated trend in light electric vehicles, in your opinion.
I would take it a bit broader. I would say that there's been in transport a demographic and an inclusivity shift, in as much as light electric vehicles are not just for young urban commuters. There's a lot more available now, which could also serve senior people or families or logistic services, and they are already increasingly adopting these new vehicles, and opening new markets and proving that light electric vehicles can have a role in mobility for all. I think that's the most important trend.
Okay, so we're saying demographics. Nice, and I like it. Most overhyped idea in the space?
The idea that electric cars will decarbonize mobility, and especially that SUVs will decarbonize mobility, because to produce even electric cars requires a lot of resources, and it's not only for that reason, not only overhyped, but also very wrong, not only in that respect, but in many different respects.
I would definitely say overhyped in the space overall is, you said, really good. Electric SUVs. So
Yeah.
electric SUVs with huge batteries is something that's really inefficient right now.
Yeah.
So yes, definitely. Our thoughts are similar. This one. A European city, you think, is setting the best example for LEVs right now? No. I'm thinking this question. Maybe it doesn't have to be European. It can also be globally.
Well, I gave it a good thought, and there are many cities which are putting in efforts, that's for sure. But the one that I would like to name is Paris, because Paris is setting one of the strongest examples right now, and they really have reallocated and are still continuing to reallocate space from car to people. They're building safe infrastructure, and they support LEV adaptation for both citizens and logistics. Um, and that combination of infrastructure, incentives, and very important political courage is exactly what Europe needs, because you see a lot of cities which would like to implement, but then there's a lot of protests from the citizens because they can't park their cars anymore, and then they just back off. So I'm
Yeah.
really in admiration of Paris, because they do have the political courage, and that's exactly what Europe needs if light electric vehicles are to reach their full potential. However, I have a special mention as well,
Okay.
and that's for Helsinki,
Okay.
because Helsinki has managed to be without any traffic-related death since July 2024, and I think that is
Wow.
really worthwhile mentioning. Yeah.
Wow. Yes. Amazing statistics. This will definitely look great into short videos when I edit this. Thank you for this insight. I also heard great things about Paris. We had a firm called Microfleet from Australia, and their owner, CEO, was recently in Paris, and he was really intrigued by how things have developed from the last time he was in Paris. I think he said he was in Paris like 25, 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And he said it's a great thing how they changed. I also heard great things about London. I'm going to London in a few months, so let's see how they have improved. I've heard a lot of good things about their like city center, that it's
Yeah.
really become bikeable.
But they're still not very well informed about how to build safe infrastructure for users of light electric vehicles. Because there's still many places in London which are extremely dangerous for the users, and as a result, there's still too many deaths there. So there is a will to achieve something, but they don't always have the knowledge yet to do it in the right way.
Yeah, and me personally, I was quite impressed by, when you compare the rest of the U.S. to New York to Manhattan, because Manhattan actually worked
Yeah.
for me when I was there. It was quite okay for American standards. It was quite okay. We kind of touched on this. One regulation you love to rewrite from scratch. Yes, it's kind
I
of
want to
self.
write the LEV regulation. And
Yeah.
so in writing the LEV regulation, we have to rewrite 168/2013 and the
Okay.
machinery directive. I'm like this old record going round and round
Yeah.
and round. But
Yeah.
yeah.
We all know the code of this regulation. And the last one, maybe you can highlight some of your members, let's say best light electric vehicles brands out there. You all already mentioned a few. Maybe if you
I'd say have a look at our membership list, which is on our website, because all the names there are effectively the best brands.
awesome, and we would love to host many of them on our show. So yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation. Thank you to you and the whole LEVA-EU team for giving us, a closer look at the fight for fair rules in a light electric vehicle sector, from challenging outdated European classification to supporting SMEs, and from pushing for climate aligned policy to ensuring LEVs makers have a seat at the EU table. LEVA-EU is shaping the future of sustainable urban transport. We'll be following their progress closely, because if Europe gets the rules right, light electrical vehicles can transform how the continent moves. And until next time, keep it sustainable, keep it light, and keep each other stack. Thank you so much, Annick. Once more, we hope to collaborate with you again in the future.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.